And I think that that type of approach to support is really what separates healthcare security from any other industry, right? Because you're like really invested on the people that are inside your house. When we go out and deliver training, that's something that Dela Cruz and I are always saying to these nurses, like, this is your house when you're in here. And like, what are the things that you're going to do in a layered approach to protect your house? Just understanding that you do have a responsibility as any type of leadership, CNO, CEO, CFO right now, to really try and create this, not just a sense of security, but true
genuine security,
because that's what's going to save y'all's brands. If you look at the striking and everything that's going on in the country right now, that's the thing that's going to keep you afloat when the system starts to get really, really wavery. And I think that understanding who to turn to, and it's these salty military guys, and that's kind of how I got started, right? Who can I find that's a badass to help me figure out what I need to do, because I just got done wearing trash bags through this horrific event. Like, I'm not about to go through something else again. And right. I think that's kind of where I found you, and through that connection with Covered 6. And the reason I found them was because their branding was good.
Yep.
You know, their branding was good. I knew that he had established some sort of standard. I was like, I think that if we're looking at security for an approach, Dela Cruz and I always talk about how can we possibly disseminate all this information to 4 million nurses out there, just nurses, not to mention like the doctors and everybody else that's around. And then I looked at BLS. Everybody has CPR.
Right.
So if the people that are taking CPR, if they get basic tactical training, just enough, just CPR, it's enough to keep the patient alive, just enough to keep you safe and the organization safe, then maybe there's a next level for ACLS or advanced providers. And then maybe there's the level that an echelon that just security focuses on. And I think that's the way that we'll be able to scale the training and being able to really brand it.
I think one of the things to point out, though, is the keyword comprehensive keeps coming to mind. You know, nurses have a very specific, task organization, very specific, way of doing things, way of looking at things. And security, whether it's a positive or a negative, it is the way it is. Security looks at things from a different perspective. So I think being able to get care providers and security providers to sit down at the table and develop a comprehensive style of problem solving and things along those lines is really what's going to be key.
And I think our approaches are so different, right? Like you have this background of law enforcement, military, like really high caliber yacht raw stuff. And then I'm over here, like I went to school and everybody was worried about, patient dignity and how to be nice to grandma and, patient service and that service line industry. So it's like, how do you tell me how to do my job safely, and how do I try and translate my nursing model or the way I care for people over to what you do? And that's how we were born, right? Because I think that expecting the same type of result when you have a gun, a badge, and your size. I mean, Micah, how tall are you?
6'2". But
to expect you and Dela Cruz to have the same approach as I do is not practical. Yeah. I'm not intimidating. Like the 6'5" violent offender thinks I'm a rag doll and he'll do whatever to get out of the space,
Yeah, but survival is universal. Whether it's 6'4" Micah or 6'1" me or 4'1" you, there is a universal aspect to just surviving and defending yourself.
Right. And I think though, like the techniques, I watch John Wick. I can't do John Wick shit. So what are the techniques that I need to do from my build and my perspective? And are there things about my profession that I can use? So like, I think one of the reasons that the violence rates is increased, I'll tell you, every single interview I go on or podcast, that's the first question people ask me is like, why do you think the violence rates are increasing? And I said, because we lost our lack of authority. So like back in the day, I had this nurse that trained me, we'll call her Joey, but she was like, if she came in the room, she was like, get up. And that patient was like, well, I don't want, she's like, I don't care. And the blinds were open, the covers were off that patient, and we were ambulating that patient. And you know what? Her post-op hearts didn't get pneumonias because she did what she was supposed to do. But now patients are allowed to refuse. And because you get punished, so I'll tell you this story. When I was a new nurse, and I want to hear your opinions as gentlemen and as security experts on what happened to me. So I was 21 years old. Or maybe 22. I was pregnant with my first son. It was my first job as a nurse, and I went in the patient's room, and they used to hand out like these service line cards, like a hospitality with our pictures on them, and the guy was in there masturbating into our pictures. And so I walked in the room, and I was like, what are you doing? And so he complained, and I ended up getting written up for being rude to a patient, and then he got a $25 gift card to a local restaurant.
It's horrible. I'm surprised you didn't punch him in the face.
I don't
both
know.
Both as a man, and as a professional. You know, no matter what industry you're in, as a man and as a professional, it's completely uncalled for.
And that's what these are happening to these girls. These girls out there, and these girls that are graduating now are. I mean, I'm a pretty tough chick. You know, I grew up the way I grew up. My dad was, you know, pretty on the rednecky side of things. So I'm pretty hardy, I guess. And then lived in Baltimore, worked in Baltimore. So I'm not like some of these young girls that are out there. And I mean, I'm telling you, they come out of the room crying. They're horrified. And if you've had some sort of sexual trauma in your past, which we're learning about now is really, really prevalent, what do you think that happens to that person as they leave? And then you wonder why almost 50% of new grad nurses are leaving within the first 2 years of the profession.
Mm-hmm.
What was your response other than what the fuck?
So you know what saved me? And this is what the problem is. I had another nurse that worked with me, our good friend Kristen, and she's since now pivoted to like a wellness nurse. She does that kind of thing, but and well-being and life coaching for nursing. But she was an experienced nurse, and she was like, don't sign that right up, Mel. Like, you cannot sign that. Like, that's effed up. And then she went into the manager's office and, like, kind of negotiated on my behalf and whatever. And she's like, we're going to HR. Like, she had told me what to do. But without her guidance, I would have never known what to do. And she'd been a nurse for 10 years before me. So we don't have that tenure. Anywhere I go, 10 years, 10, 15 years as a nurse, I am, like, grandma.
Yeah.
Grandma. And that's really scary because, like, they are the ones that are catching the key things that the doctor does not have time to assess.
Let me ask you this. Were you working in a unionized hospital as well?
No. And so that's the thing. Like, you can't join a union. And I don't even know that that's the best solution because then you've got another element of bureaucracy trying to control shit.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So, and who knows where the funding's coming from. And I'm not saying that that's a good solution. I am not educated enough about it to, like, even try and have that discussion. I know that there are nurses that are. But I think that there's a conversation that needs to be had about fucking bare minimums and standards with which, I mean, I can go a 12-hour shift and not pee.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I chose not to pee or not to eat, I mean, you guys have been in healthcare, known people in healthcare, and Sam, you know, picks up a little bit in doing the security element just so he can understand how this stuff relates. And you can see that they're just exhausted, purely exhausted. And then you're supposed to mitigate your emotions on top of that, you know?
Which is hard just as a human to have something like that. Again, like you said, if you had some type of sexual trauma in the past and then you have something like that happen to you, it's very hard. And I see it in the collaboration that I'm in now with my local hospital. When we have any type of code, whether it's a code blue or code green, but there's a violent patient right after, I can see the nurse that was in charge of that situation, at least for the rest of her shift. She's in the complete bad mood. She's not talking to anybody. She's isolating herself. And, you know, maybe you can speak to what could be a way to kind of deter that post-incident stress.
Yeah, I think like being around you guys and learning the techniques to really control emotions is really important. I think people want to talk shit about breath work, but like if you know a Marine that's just hiked 12 miles and has to lay down and take a shot, it's their breath steadying their cardiovascular system that allows them to even think about fucking taking somebody out at a long yardage, post that type of adrenaline dump, and I think that's the techniques that we need to adopt and we need to learn from those situations where stress levels are very high and you're running on low sleep, but you're expected to make executive level cognitive decisions. And then we have to remember, when we're talking to the patient, they're far from that level, right? They're at this fight or flight. They might be terrified of hospitals. And then if we look at a psych patient, right, somebody who's in psychosis, their brain is not operating in organized behaviors, so they're panicked. They're terrified. And we have to look at it as that. But we can't look at it in a way that, oh, poor Mr. Jones, he's just scared. He's just a psych patient. I'll put up with the violence. Like, there has to be a way to approach the situation systematically with an approach that is proven to work, and then be able to care for the patient.
So I think a couple things to take into consideration is what leads up to the incident itself, the pre-incident. And I'm talking several weeks in advance. So one of the things that you pointed out with, you know, the military and law enforcement is those industries specifically are introduced to stress inoculation, you know, at the very beginning of the career. Boot camp, for example. You've got drill instructors that are in your face, rah, rah, rah.
And it's simulated to the environment you're going to get. Nursing students, it's stress, but it's like paperwork stress, and it's not simulated at all to the environment. So that's like something that we could definitely take from your experience.
Sure. And then as we forward, forward the view to pre-incident, just before the incident, is what can we do to mitigate any potential risks? We had a discussion before where you had talked about, even setting up the room in a more effective, efficient manner so that when the caretaker comes in, they almost automatically have to go to a point in the room that they could get blocked in.
Yeah.
And now they can't leave. And now they're at the whim of what's going on. So maybe even shifting, some of the furniture in the room, the bed, the chairs, et cetera, the table, the chairs, so that when they come in, and like you had talked about before, interacting with them so that you have the ability to gauge, here's a glass of water, here's a bottle of water, and being able to really gauge that before it turns into an incident.
And I think one of the things that I hear from administration a lot is they know that. They know they're supposed to remove the things out of the room. They know that. But the reason that the training is not sticking is because it's being presented in a way that is not appealing at all to someone who is traumatized by this. If you were to come to a rape victim and say, well, wrong place, wrong time,
it's not going to go over very well.
That's exactly what you're doing to us. He's saying, well, you should have had a more customer service approach. How could you have said that better? Now, granted, that may be something that needs to be integrated, and I'm fucking professional instigator. Like, if anybody who knows me, like, my mother will tell you, like, I probably have oppositional defiance disorder. Like, I can be not nice. So I'm guilty of it as the next person, but through the techniques that I've learned and been able to practice and develop for the past 3 years that we've been doing this, now I can see, like, okay, as much as I want to say something, it's not even worth letting them have my energy. And how can I just rely on my professionalism to get me through this situation? And then it's just a situation. It's not me. It's not my nursing care, as long as I was not being negligent, right? Like, it was an experience that the patient was having because they are a human being in a chaotic, scary environment. And I was scared. So I'm having a fright or flight reaction, right? So now we have to figure out, okay, if I'm going to be the only person in charge here, I'm going to be the one leading this, which, like we said, I mentioned that interview or thing I had seen where they were talking about where the nurse's responsibility lies. And yeah, you want to believe that the nurse is going to be like, okay, yeah, I need hands-on, let's go, like, get this guy down and I'll inject him. But what if she doesn't have her meds ready? What if she hasn't gotten an order from the physician? Like, what if she doesn't really know what's best for that patient, and honestly that patient is hypoxic and they need oxygen? You know what I mean? So you're relying on the nurse to have all this training. Then in the inverse, if Dela Cruz walks in the room and I'm like, Dela Cruz, I need to restrain him. Like he's obviously going to get sicker if we don't help him. He's confused. And Dela Cruz says, okay, and I trust that Dela Cruz has the right technique to not hurt this patient. How would I know that? Right. If I don't have the training to know that? And now that I do have the training from you guys, and just I'll see a technique and I'll shoot Micah a text and be like, what do you think? He's like, oh my God. Or he's like, yeah, that looks good, And that's just so that I can understand what I'm looking at, because I want to be able to educate my colleagues about, if you see someone sitting on top of somebody else, or they're up near the head in the airway, and you can't assess a patient from their belly. Like, that is just not a great option. And I think a lot of these organizations are going with training programs because they don't know. They don't have time. What CEO or CNO has time to research what's the best tactic? And I think they're trusting these organizations when a lot of times the organizations or companies have experience, but have it from this military police side, and to expect healthcare workers to enact the same mechanical stuff is really, it's not fair.
I don't. You already said it at the beginning. There's two words: responsibility and leadership. Those are the two things that are absolutely missing, because nobody wants to take responsibility, and everybody thinks they're a leader. And those two things combined equate to education. And Mike and I have worked together on a lot of details and a lot of different operations, and there'll be a time where a principal or someone of our care, they gravitate towards Micah because that's who they gravitate towards. And I'm the guy in charge. I'm the guy who says what happens and doesn't happen. And I watch this take place. And as a leader, as someone who's responsible in my profession, that's exactly what needs to happen. Yes, ma'am, that's her. Yes, sir, whatever it is. It's like, yeah, Micah's your dude. And off they go. I will support him every way there is. But we have a different way that we do things. From military law enforcement and even in the contracting world, security world, we compartmentalize things.
Yeah.
And it's step one, step two, step three. A threat is always going to reveal itself. Sometimes it's very, very subtle. Sometimes it can't be accounted for, but there's always indicators in it.
Yeah, we don't know those indicators. Like, until I started working with you guys and like learning what a behavioral anomaly is, or like what to even look for, I would have never assumed the things that I see are indicators. And now I'm like, yo, watch out. Like this could escalate. And maybe it doesn't. Like maybe we just get lucky and it doesn't. But at least we were all mentally in the space to prepare for it. Just like when you're doing BLS, right? The first thing they teach you is scene assessment. Is it even safe? And then you go, hey, are you okay? And it's the same verbiage. We're going to say, hi, how can I help you? And if that patient can have a dialogue with you and tell you what they need, then we can enter into the green phase, or the de-escalation phase, which we don't even use that word because it's a terrible word, and it puts blame on the patient, blame on the healthcare worker for escalating a situation. But we try to dance with them, right? We try to counterbalance, is a phrase that Dela Cruz came up with, but about how to see what behavioral anomalies there are, and then how to determine if they're even negotiable. Because if they're not, then we need to be starting to think about our own physical safety. Because I have 5 other patients that I'm responsible for right now. So if I get fucked up, like your grandma could die, or like whoever could die. And that's what happened in that really big moment that Dela Cruz and I kind of got started. Was really 3 years ago. I was in that ED and the patient got the metal mop. And because I couldn't get past him, and I tried. I mean, he beat the shit out of us. And I tried, but because I couldn't, I had a patient arrest in the front room. And I promised myself after that, I was like, I will never let another poorly managed situation get in the way of me providing patient care to someone else.
Mm-hmm. It definitely goes back to training as well. I think a lot of people do this once a year, re-up on their whatever certification, not to name any names, but they do it once a year. They do it for an hour, and then they're done.
Yeah.
And like,
they check a box.
Exactly. They're just trying to get back to their shift.
Tell them about that experience you had when you put So, like, in order for Dela Cruz to understand the market, he was like, yo, I'm gonna try this out. So tell him about the experience with, like, the nurse in your class, like, when you're doing your training. We won't say the name, but the training.
Well, there is a standardized, which is, I think, answer to your earlier question.
But it's not implemented standardized. I think they tried to do it, but it's the people giving these classes are not following any type of like structure.
Oh, no, not at all. According to him, this is a 4-hour class, but we can knock it out in an hour. So we did. In about 15 minutes, we got everything done we needed to get done, I guess. But, you know, I was just sitting there and listening to him talk about, you know, the de-escalation and then going into all these techniques, which I've seen before in like old 90s movies of cops, you know, and it's a lot of it is just pain compliance.
Yep.
And I don't think it takes into account that psych patients don't care about pain. So
if you break their hand, the better, because then you're really the Nazi that was attacking them.
Yes,
like.
Exactly. So I'm in this class with maybe 6 other people, and he's going on about his presentation, and I'm not trying to be a dick, but now I got to ask questions because, okay, you've gotten your patient to this point. Okay, now what? What if he fights back? And he just looks at me like, stop being a dick. And I was like, okay, I'm sorry, but that is a valid question. You're not going to tell me it's not.
So what happens next?
So he didn't really have an answer. And he looked at me and just shook his head like, I'm just get it over with, dude. I got to sign this thing. Do you want your certification or not? And I was like, okay.
And I think that that's not their fault. Like, say you're a director of security, right? And you're like a yacht raw dude. You're a Micah. You're a Texas. You're a Eric Clay, right? And now you're tasked with coming up with a compliance class to educate. How many employees do you think Eric Clay is in charge of securing? Like what he's doing? That's a fucking lot, okay?
Thousand.
So now he's responsible for making sure every one of them gets trained and gets trained well enough to that if he's in deposition in front of a judge and it's like, you trained your employees? He's like, yes, I did. And that's because he's got a cover-to-cover program that they can find. But I think that what healthcare organizations need to look at now in the age of leveraging technology, like, is there a way that you can provide training cheaper, more effective, because it's more frequent by accumulating that BLS ACLS model? And then what does that training look like? And like, I know nurses that do BLS, but like, if their patient's dead in front of them, and you know, I'm an ICU nurse, so you know, I've watched lots of people die, whatever. It is just what it is. But I noticed that they freeze, and there are people like our friend Susan Davis who has code prep, and it's literally all she fucking does is drill on the first 2 minutes of CPR. She's like, if that person can do those first 2 minutes and keep going, they're going to keep that patient alive. They're going to perfuse the brain. ACLS and ICU nurses are going to run up the steps, you know, and get there when they get there. But if that first 2 minutes is done well until people can get there, they're going to live. And so she focuses her efforts there. And I think that that's what some organizations, like if I was to give advice to an Eric Clay type guy, you've got all these people, dude, start with your concentric layering and start in the bread and butter. Like, start in the beginning, because if you can start training those people at the base of the wound, like Dela Cruz has this really great analogy that he uses about like a wound and how you have to pack that wound with antibiotic solution. If you just put a Band-Aid over the top of it, it's gonna fester, it's gonna pus, it's gonna get gross. So like, you have to pack it, and then you have to take the packing out every once in a while and check the wound bed and repack. And that's what training is. Training is touching every single employee, and they need to be medicated essentially with that antibiotic ointment every couple months.
So here's a big pet peeve of mine when we talk about training, because we love training. We are all about training. Training is...
Micah loves training.
Oh, hell yes. So the thing that we have to focus on...
Do it again, Micah.
We love training. So the thing that we have to focus on is the quality of the training. So to use Dela Cruz's analogy of the wound, it's one thing to put, you know, like Walmart brand antibiotic ointment on there. It's another thing completely to put, the high quality Neosporin in there. And so
this is in no way a reference to any drug quality or product. We're just using it as an example.
correct, legal boilerplate, all that included. So the thing with training though is on the training side of the house, we have what's called vicarious liability. So in every training class we go through, we have people that say, okay, if I've got a particular situation, what do I do next? Because, just like Dela Cruz asked, what's next? Mm-hmm. And there's
always a next.
There's always a next.
Even at the end of the event, when everybody's done getting bloody and there's still a debriefing portion that needs to be done. There's always a next.
There's always a next. So if I tell somebody in one of my classes, this is how you respond to that. And they go, so let's say I say, okay, somebody, gets in my face. What do? You take out your baton, and I tell them, you take out your baton and you hit them in the face. They're going to go out there and they're going to take out their baton and hit somebody in the face.
And like, if you're not a CNO, like, okay, not obviously that exaggerated of a situation, but like Dela Cruz was saying with the pain compliance, if you're just the CEO or security guy who's been tasked with this and you don't know that that's not best practice, you could watch the class and think it's great, but then it go out and teach everybody, and now you're getting shot in the foot later on because somebody taught something that they weren't supposed to teach.
Absolutely. And so as an instructor, that's going to come back on me.
Yeah.
Because the first thing that's going to happen is, oh my God, why did you hit that guy in the face with a baton?
But it doesn't in healthcare. You know why? Because it's the fucking nurse's fault.
It's always and it's always the officer's fault too. Mm-hmm. It's always going to be the bottom on the totem pole's fault. It's like, well, what could you have
done better to de-escalate this situation? It's like the dude threw a urinal of piss at me and then punched me in the mouth. Like, I was trying to give him his Lasix, bro. Like, we were just in there to do what I had to do because he shit himself. Like,
in our industry, let me translate what you just said. Why couldn't you have shot him in the leg? Why couldn't you have done something else less?
Yeah.
When they come yelling at you as the nurse and say, what could you have done to de-escalate better? What did you say to piss him off?
I just had to discharge my weapon on a fucking human that I was assigned to protect. And I know that there are cops that have been, like, giving cops a bad rap, right?
Sure. But there's always the 3%.
But I'm from Baltimore. Like, and if you want to talk about cops and demographics, and I've worked on the floor in University of Maryland shock trauma. We average 9 to 12 gunshot wounds a night, okay? And so that type of, and I've gotten patients in that 8 floors of trauma, and like that dynamic, those cops are risking their lives for those kids, and I know that, and I think that's the majority, and I think we get caught up in the bad, because like, everybody's going to review something and tell something bad times 10 and something good only times 1. So, and nurses now have experienced that. Like, I remember during COVID, I went to the grocery store and I would wear a mask because I didn't want to get anybody sick, because I was like around high viral loads. I was intubating people. Like, I didn't even send my kids to school for 2 years because I was terrified, because I had a patient who was a teacher and she died, and like her entire family, like her son, her brother, her husband, the only daughter that lived was in California, and I called her 4 times to tell her that her entire family was fucking dead. So, and she was a teacher. She got it at school. So I didn't send my kids to school for 2 years because I was fucking traumatized.
Right.
So it's the same thing with these officers that, you're expected to do something and then the situation doesn't go that way, whether it's lack of training, lack of systems, it's just wrong place, wrong time. And then now it falls on us. And I think that's where in the healthcare industry, physicians really need to step up and say, hey, like, I can go into my office and get away from this. But I remember when I first started as a nurse, if somebody was violent, we went and got the doctor. The doctor came in the room and said, you will not behave like that with my nurses. And I think that camaraderie is lost because there's nobody left at the bedside. So we need to learn those skills and techniques, and that's something that needs to be included in the class. Like, it's not just for you. Like, Salty Kristen, Salty Mel can handle a patient that's throwing punches. Like, I'll go. Let's go. Like, I got you. Right? But the new nurse can't. And, like, we're protecting her by making sure that that's not appropriate behavior.
Yeah, but again, it goes back to mitigating the baton in the face, the getting shot, the let's throw hands. It starts at the patient,
before the incident.
It starts at what is the patient's baseline, and is he starting to rile up? Is he showing anomalies? We'll start there, because I'd much rather start there and stop it there than deal with the patient throwing shit at me.
Yeah, that sucks.
And, you know,
One time I
brings
got
up
it
a
in my
fantastic-
mouth.
well, he brings up a fantastic point as far as, you know, do we want to deal with the incident in the room, or do we want to identify the potential of incident, like when he's crossing the street to come into the
Dude,
building?
and that's why I love that collaboration that we saw at Stanford Health, where the nurse, this nurse that was, well, she was a cop, and then she became an RN, is in school for her RN. Like, shout out to her because she's a badass. I think she's incredible, and she's built this program where police talk to nurses and there's a case manager, and ideally you go out to a scene call and you think it's a psych call, get the medic there with orders from the doctor to give Thorazine IM, get that patient in the back of your car, in the ambulance, wherever, on a monitor if that's what needs to be done to monitor cardiac rhythm, and get him to the hospital already ready to like receive care. Like, why are we putting that whole chain of people at risk? Do you know what it's like to drive 90 miles an hour and then have somebody in the back
Yes,
fucking geeking out?
Yes, I do. I know exactly what that's about.
Dude,
I know all about that.
I have 3 children, so like that kind of happens sometimes. I cannot imagine driving a fucking ambulance. Or,
I'm a cop.
Or like being
You know,
in the
with
back
the ED
of,
in the
yeah,
back, you
yeah.
know, and the person calling me Satan, and you know,
That's what I get every day. And
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, Satan wears blue. Thank
right?
you.
Yep.
I am Satan. Remember that shit. Now fucking take these pills, Miss Dolores.
So I love the concept of having that dual capability of, you know, especially when we start talking about EDs out in the field, or emergency detainments out in the field. You know, you've got that psych patient, you know, they're still wearing the paper scrubs that they're given that they were just
Right.
discharged in a
And,
few
like-
hours ago.
And like, can you imagine how fucking terrified they are? Like, if you really believe that.
Well, and that's just it. They may not even know they're terrified.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I had Jesus Christ in the back of my truck.
Me too. I've met him a lot.
I've met him a lot too, and
Yeah.
he comes in different forms.
Yes, he does.
I'm a
And-
Nazi, so
You're a
there's
Nazi.
that.
So, you know, I've had Jesus Christ in the back of my cruiser, and he doesn't even know he's scared. He doesn't even know he's, you know, the whole
Have you
concept.
seen that video where the Jesus is wading into the river, and the lady calls the cops, and he's like got a ladder and everything? Have you seen that on TikTok? Oh my god, it's like a 5-part video, and it's like on I think it's cops, right, or something. And the cops get called because he's in the backyard of this lady's house, and he's got this river, and there's like this. He's getting this ladder, and he's like, she wants to be baptized, and the lady's like, this guy has been in my yard for like 4 weeks. Like, he's homeless. He's in a robe. It's snowing. I think there was like ice, and he's in the water, and he's like, I'm baptizing people. Come on in, officer. Officer's like, I'm already baptized, man. Like,
I'm good.
he was like, you really need to come with us. You're like freezing. He's like, no. I gotta baptize this lady. And the lady's like, get him the fuck up out of my yard. And the cops are like, he was so sweet and so kind, and like, but he had time. In the
Boom.
ED, I don't
Exactly.
have fucking time for that. So if you want me to de-escalate a patient that's fucking dying, like I can't. You know, a lot of times they get aggravated and aggressive because they're hypoxic, right? They
Right.
can't get enough oxygen. Maybe they've got a metabolic imbalance and it's causing the oxyhemoglobin shift, but something is going on and I need to help them. I might need to get them down and intubate them. I don't know. So at that point, how do we do it quickly and swiftly and safely? And I think that's where the techniques, that executive protection stuff
And
comes
empathetically.
in. Yeah. Like, I'm going to feel bad about it. Like, I do feel bad for these guys.
Yeah, I think time is crucial, because there is plenty of times where I have responded to a scene where, again, the charge nurse or whoever is trying to give meds,
Yeah.
but they don't have the order yet.
Yeah.
So I show up to the scene and I'm thinking, okay, just, you know, hold him down or whatever. He's being combative. He's throwing kicks. He's throwing punches. Just hold him down. They'll push meds. It'll be fine. The meds aren't ready. Meds won't be ready for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So am I supposed to sit there and play jujitsu with this guy until the meds are ready?
And is
No.
that better for him? Because now he doesn't trust you. He's scared. Like, what
Well-
if there was a more... Like, if Dela Cruz knew that there was a situation and the nurse knew how to hand off, hey, man, I called you because I saw X, Y, and Z behavioral anomaly. I'm going to get these meds for this situation that's happening. I need you to keep him within this bounds for an hour.
Yeah, and
Or whatever.
In my experience, there is There is no debrief. There is no.
Because she doesn't know how to
the scene.
deliver the information. It's not
Exactly.
because she doesn't fucking want to, because she wants your help. Because if I waste my time to call security and sometimes security can't even touch the patient, I really don't know what else to do.
So those two elements need to get on the same page, like real quick, because not only are there legal aspects that medical providers have to abide by, there's an entirely different set of legal parameters
And that's
that
why
we have to
security
abide
can't
by.
touch nobody anymore, because there
Not
was no
necessarily.
handoff of information.
I agree that is definitely a part of it, but there's also the whole liability aspect that nobody wants to touch themselves. That came across wrong. There's the whole liability aspect that nobody wants to touch.
Myself right now.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you for that visual. So there's the whole liability mitigation aspect that we have to look at. But, when it comes to medical has their masters that they have to appease. Law enforcement and the legal field and the liability field have their masters that have to
I don't
be
think
appeased.
anybody knows where the line is, or like what the roles and responsibilities are. And when we
That-
when we do our training, it's like, okay, when we come into a facility, it's not like we just teach you a blanket course. It's like, okay, where are your rules and where are your roles and responsibilities, and where do the lines draw? And if they don't have them drawn clearly, that's where we bring in people like you, and we help define the fucking lines, so that you can develop the proper training for your organization. Because you
I
may
think that's
only
the
have
key phrase
one
right there.
security guard that can, or officer.
You're speaking things.
Yeah,
so
but
just
what if
submit,
you
and
but
that's
what if you
bullshit.
have an organization that has contracted security from Allied or something, and they're not allowed to touch the patient? So like, how do
Christ, you used Allied.
we empower them though? Because they do have a role. Their eyes and ears and the things that they do are very important. That's why they're
You
there.
just said it. That's for organizations of that caliber. That's all they are. They're eyes and ears.
Right.
And going back to responsibility and leadership, got to have leadership that empowers their people. Your leadership, regardless if it's law enforcement, medical, or any other field, a true leader will be the one who gives you what you need long before you ask for it, because they know what you need. You can be that one that says, hey, we need this equipment or that equipment. Now there's feedback. That's one thing. But then asking is like, dude, we need this. We've got to have this.
And a lot of times in
And-
healthcare, they don't have anybody for that. Like, they don't have anybody that knows what the fuck they need. So that's where it's important to be able to have low, cost-effective solutions and places where
And that's-
where we can say, hey, this is what you need. This is, either a resource that you can come to, and not shield it behind millions and millions of dollars, because healthcare
And that's
seemingly
part of
has
my
the
point.
money.
That's part of my point. I don't know the intricacies of the medical world. I'm fairly familiar with them, but I don't know the in depth. I can talk to you a little bit about law enforcement and some others, but we have in the law enforcement community for the last 30 years reduced our standard to an absolute pathetic amount. And now we have people that are wearing a badge that have no reason
Why do you
to do
think
it
the
because
standard has decreased like that?
so the people cry out that there's not enough black officers, there's not enough Hispanic officers, there's not enough female officers.
That's true in the military
And-
too, right? They have to like meet a quota.
It is. It's. I hate to say it, but it's absolutely there. And the standard should be the standard. So if you have to do X amount of pull-ups and X amount of push-ups just to meet the physical standard, then that's the standard.
You know what I
we
love?
don't change that for females.
You know what I love about Texas is that it doesn't matter like what color the people are in Texas. There's still like the same amount of hardy motherfuckers. Like, and I've never experienced that because I grew up in a very like northern area of Maryland that was very racist. Like, I think I was one of the few people of color to graduate. I actually had to eat lunch for a week in the principal's office my freshman year of high school, because when I went to the high school, people were throwing food at me because we were in the Iraq war. So they thought I was from Iraq. So they kept yelling at me and throwing shit at me in the cafeteria. So like, I understand, but I also like when I graduated, I was friends with those people. Like, I understood it was just a lack of education. And I think like,
My last name is Cortez, asshole.
right? Well, it wasn't then. Yeah. Like, so I don't know.
Stop wearing
Not-
the shamag.
So
Stop
like,
wearing the shamag.
right, so I was adopted. So I was born in an orphanage in Colombia, and then I grew up in northern Maryland to a very, my dad was middle class, but he worked his way up. He worked his ass off. And so we ended up, having a nice life and everything. And I think that I saw both sides. Like, I saw both sides of what America is going through right now. And like, there really isn't a fucking side. Everybody is still American. And I think that that's an important portion of like what we need to remember, because innovation in healthcare has always occurred at the bedsides of soldiers, sailors, and Marines. And now you guys are coming, and you guys are coming back to help us after we fucking wore trash bags, and I'm eternally grateful. And I think that this conversation that we're having now needs to continue, and I think that it's something that we're really excited about offering this podcast, because I think that there is an opportunity for us to create this bridge of knowledge and education, and stop hiding it from the people that need it, and just leverage the organizations that are out there and empower people to like take back the safety that we feel as Americans, and I think that it's time for us to step up and work together and find solutions, and then present those solutions to the people that are available to make those decisions, like CEOs and CNOs, and offer them the solutions. And it's up to them then, and they have an obligation to their staff and to the people that they care for to make informed decisions, and we just want to make that information more available.
I think the one of the things that is really necessary in the development of this discussion phase between our two worlds is we have to be able to, number one, trust each other.
Yeah.
The two worlds need to be able to trust each other, but we also need to be able to take the velvet gloves off and say, look, this is bullshit.
Yeah.
And this needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
But not just, say, hey, this is bullshit, because ask any military member in the world, you never go to the gunny, you never go to the CO and say, this is bullshit, and leave it at that. You always come up with a solution, or at least options to improve
and
the
that's
situation.
The goal for me is like to empower these nurses. Like, they're on strike, they're standing on the street corner dancing to reggaeton. Like, why aren't you out there fucking creating solutions? And don't look at me and say, oh, I don't know what to do, like I don't know how to do it. You do. You're a professional. You can research shit. Like, you're just as if I can do it, going through the last 4 years of my life. I'm a single mom of 3 boys under 10, and I work full time as a nurse, and now I'm consulting and helping people in this space because I believe that that's what I'm supposed to be doing. But don't tell me you're too busy to do it and just sit there and complain. So I think that there are organizations, people that run healthcare organizations do not become CEOs of healthcare because they don't want to make, they just want to make money. They could go run a Fortune 500
That's called responsibility, Melissa.
Yeah, they could. And they could.
And you took it. You took it. You took responsibility.
And you could go run a Fortune 500 company. You have an MBA. But they're choosing healthcare for a reason. So we need them to correlate their why with our why. And I think that that is really gonna drive things in the future.
It's an uphill battle, and that's the thing.
But like, honestly, fuck them. And like, who many of us in here haven't been in an uphill fucking battle? Okay, like
absolutely.
And I think that's where the synergy comes from now. Like, I never understood what the sacrifice looked like for you guys, and I think after COVID and watching literally thousands of people drown in their secretions, I realized that, like, okay, this is death on a large scale that I can do nothing about, even though I've been trained to do something about it. And I think that is really what's brought synergy between us. So I'm excited for the collaboration, and I'm excited to have you guys here with us. I'm really grateful to you because you've got your own things going on. Micah and Texas run Paradis Investigations and Training, and they're currently right now really leveraging the Texas market and moving into training these resource officers that are now legally required for schools. And I'm going to tell you, they have one of the best training programs that I have seen. If you're interested in getting information, we will definitely have their link to their LinkedIn and their website in the show notes here. I just want to say thank you so much to Chatterbox and Ernest. He's sitting in here in the room with us as we record this podcast. You don't know this. You didn't know this going into this, Ernest, but we are going to save lives with this content, and this content will be impactful on a global scale. So I'm really excited to do this, and thank you so much to Dela Cruz, my co-founder, who is coming off 5 12-hour night shifts in a row, and here and just wanting to add his expertise. And we're excited about the things coming in the industry. I just want to mention that We'll be back next week with another awesome episode. And today we are drinking Woodford Reserve. I'm going to start looking at some awesome opportunities for Texas brand whiskey wine. And I think you guys have an awesome growing season here for your wine from what I can see. So I think there's some opportunities. If you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, please follow the link below. We'd love to have you. If you have a tech solution that you think will apply to healthcare, we'll break it down. And we will be having Micah in Texas on with us periodically. So please be sure to put your questions in the comments and engage with Spotify. And we will be bringing you some more awesome educational content soon.
It's been awesome. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.